GDP, gross domestic product, is one of the most commonly used tools to evaluate a country's economy. It calculates the total monetary value of all goods and services produced within a nation over a specific time. GDP is popular because it is simple to understand, easy to measure, and provides a clear snapshot of economic activity. However, despite its usefulness, it has serious limitations. Why GDP is important? Economic health. GDP provides a snapshot of how well an economy is performing. If GDP grows, it generally means businesses are thriving, employment is rising, and incomes are improving. If GDP declines over 2 consecutive quarters, it shows the economy is in recession. Policy decisions. Governments use GDP data to decide on taxes, spending, and policies to address economic challenges like inflation or recession. Global comparisons. GDP helps compare the economies of different countries. For example, the U.S. had a GDP of $27.72 trillion in 2023, while China's was $17.79 trillion. India and Russia GDP versus living conditions. But gross domestic product has limits. It can create the illusion of widespread prosperity when masking significant income inequality. For instance, India boasts one of the world's largest economies with a fast-growing technology sector and a growing number of billionaires. It's fifth country in the world in terms of GDP, yet a large part of its population lives in poverty. Many people live in overcrowded slums with inadequate access to clean water, sanitation, and healthcare. Basic necessities like electricity and education remain out of reach for millions, highlighting the contrast between the rich elite and the impoverished masses. Similarly, Russia presents another example of this economic paradox. It's placed on 11th place in the world in terms of GDP. Despite its considerable GDP, a significant segment of its population lacks basic amenities. According to official statistics from Rosstat, as of 2018, 22.6% of Russian households were not connected to a centralized sewage system. In rural areas, the situation is even worse, with approximately 2/3 of residents lacking access to indoor toilets. Specifically, 48.1% rely on outhouses, and 18.4% have no sewage system at all. This means that millions of Russians live without fundamental sanitation facilities. Japan. Destruction can boost GDP. Gross domestic product counts all spending, even when it's caused by bad things. For example, wars or natural disasters can make GDP go up because of all the money spent on rebuilding. Take Japan after the 2011 tsunami. Its GDP rose because of massive construction projects to repair the damage. But no one would say Japan's economy was healthy during that time. People were suffering, and the growth just reflected the cost of fixing a tragedy, not real progress. Another issue is how GDP ignores harm to the environment. When industries cut down forests, pollute rivers, or burn through natural resources, they make money, and that boosts GDP. But the damage, like dirty water or lost forests, doesn't get subtracted, so a country might look richer on paper while actually becoming worse off in the long run. For instance, if a factory pollutes a river and then the government spends millions cleaning it up, both the factory's profits and the cleanup costs add to GDP. That makes it seem like the economy is growing, even though the pollution hurt people and nature. War is another great example. Imagine a country spends a fortune building a rocket for the military. That spending on workers, materials, and factories boosts GDP because it all obviously counts as economic activity. Then the rocket gets launched and explodes, destroying itself and bringing no benefit to anyone. The country's no richer or better off. In fact, it's just lost money and resources. But all that spending still counts toward GDP. This shows why GDP can trick us. It tracks activity, not well-being. Japan's post-tsunami construction, pollution cleanup, and even that wasted rocket all push the numbers up. But they don't mean a country is actually better. Ireland, gross domestic product versus gross national product. GDP is like checking all the money made inside a country's borders, no matter who's making it. So if a foreign company sets up a factory in Ireland and makes a ton of profit, that counts toward Ireland's GDP because it happened there. There is alternative factor GNP, gross national product. It focuses on the money made by a country's people and companies, no matter where they are in the world. It doesn't care about foreign companies inside the country unless they're owned by locals. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Sometimes foreign companies set up shop in a country like Ireland because it's a good deal for them, low taxes, for example. They make lots of money there, which boosts Ireland's GDP. But then they send a big chunk of that money back to their home countries, like the US or Germany, instead of keeping it in Ireland, and that money leaves and Ireland doesn't really get to use it. So when you look at Ireland's GDP, 509.95 billion euros in 2023, it looks like the country is super rich. But if you check the GNP, 388.01 billion euros, it's quite a bit lower, about 121.94 billion euros less. That gap, 24% of GDP, is mostly because of those foreign companies sending their profits away. GNP shows what Ireland's own people and companies are actually earning, which some people think is a clearer picture of how the country's doing economically. In short, GDP counts everything made in the country, even if foreigners take the profits home. GNP only counts what the country's own citizens and companies keep, no matter where they earn it. That's why GNP can sometimes tell you more about a country's real economic strength in a global economy where companies move around a lot. Alternatives to GDP. Apart from GNP, experts suggest other measures. Let's have a look at them. GDP per capita divides total GDP by the population. It provides a clearer picture of average economic prosperity. Higher GDP per capita often means better living standards. For example, in 2023, the US had a GDP of $27.72 trillion, while China's was $17.79 trillion. So the USA is stronger, but the difference is not that big. But the population of the USA is 340 million, and of China, 1,400 million. So in terms of GDP per capita, the US has $82,769, much higher than China's $12,614. That's 6.5 times higher. The Human Development Index, HDI, looks at three big areas: health, education, and income. Health in HDI is measured by life expectancy, how long people live on average. A higher number means better healthcare, nutrition, and living conditions. For example, Japan has a high HDI partly because people there live into their 80s. Education is split into two parts. First, HDI checks how many years kids are expected to stay in school. Second, it looks at how many years adults have already studied. Countries like Finland score high here because education is free and valued. More schooling often means better jobs and skills. Income is the third piece. HDI uses gross national income, GNI, per person, adjusted for purchasing power. This shows how much money people have to spend or save. Norway ranks high in HDI because its income per person is strong thanks to oil wealth and good wages. HDI combines these into a score between 0 and 1. A score closer to 1, like 0.95 for Switzerland, means high human development. A lower score, like 0.4 for some African nations, shows struggles in key vital areas. Genuine Progress Indicator, GPI, is another metric that aims to create more holistic picture of economy. It includes social and environmental elements. It subtracts negative costs like pollution and crime from economic growth. For example, in GDP, spending on prisons or security or pollution cleanup might boost the numbers, but GPI recognizes these as societal and environmental losses. For example, if a country spends heavily on rebuilding after a natural disaster, GDP goes up, but Genuine Progress Indicator might go down because of the destruction and loss of well-being. On the other hand, it also accounts for benefits that aren't necessarily tied to market transactions, but improve quality of life, like education, volunteering, or access to healthcare. In essence, GPI tries to answer the question, is this economic activity actually making life better for people? GDP is useful. It tells us part of the story, but it is not enough on its own. To really understand a country's economy, we also need to look at broader context: health, education, equality, and the environment. A good economy should help people live better lives, not just produce more things.